Good afternoon, dealers and friends, and welcome to the DealerRE webinar series. I am your host, Taylor Bird, president of DealerRE. The purpose of this series is to help dealers identify and solve problems in their business, regain control of your customer's ownership experience, and ultimately be more profitable doing so. Today, we're joined by Mr. Tim Bird, founder and CEO of DealerRE, and also my dad, to discuss an opportunity for buy here, pay here dealers, and that is selling customers gap. How you doing today, Mr. Bird?
I'm great, Taylor. Hope you are.
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So let's talk about gap for buy here, pay here dealers. Could you first explain gap, give an example, and tell us what you see most dealers, buy here, pay here dealers, doing with their customers if their customer has a total loss?
All right, well, gap is a deficiency balance waiver. In other words, the customer has insurance, they wrecked their total loss their car, and then gap is designed to pay off the deficiency balance, which is the difference between what they owe and what the insurance company actually paid. And in the buy here, pay here business, there's usually always a gap. Well, what happens is that many dealers have vehicles that are total lost, and the insurance company pays what they're going to pay, and there's a deficiency balance, but because they don't have gap, the dealer ends up just wiping out their debt and moving on because he wants to keep that customer. And so basically what they're doing is providing free gap. They're giving their customers free gap when there is a better way.
Okay. Well, could you explain to us maybe and go into detail what that better way might be and the benefits not only for the dealership but also for the customer? And then after that, if you could explain maybe from the reinsurance side of point of view, if you will, how that might benefit the dealer as well.
Well, so by providing gap, in other words, by having your customer pay for gap, you are allowing the customers, all the customers, because remember, any kind of insurance type product, and I want to differentiate. This is not an insurance product, but it is an insured product, okay? But all that being said, that's because many people put money into the pool, and then a few have claims, but that way there's always money there to take care of those problems. Well, so you sell your customers gap, and then when they have a problem, that problem is taken care of, the balance, and it's really your problem, because in the buy here, pay here business, we're not going, for the most part, most dealers aren't going to go after their customers for that deficiency. So having gap, that means that you were able to recoup that deficiency balance from your customer. Now, there is a couple of ways to do this. You can buy this from a third party. You send them X number of dollars, and what happens is they either are going to cover it or they're not going to cover it. And, you know, of course, when you're dealing with a third party, remember that they are setting aside reserve to pay claims. Whatever is not used to pay claims becomes underwriting profit, their profit. So whatever they don't pay out, they get to keep. Okay, so that's why we're in the reinsurance business at DealerRE. We set you up to own your own company, your own insurance company, and you can use that for gap or CPI or warranties or service contracts, all of those things. And it all of those are work very similarly, except only your customer's money goes into your reinsurance company and only your customer's claims come out of it. But what's happening is that it's the same thing. You are putting enough money away because every customer's paying in, that you are able to pay your claims and you have reserve left over, okay? And when you do, then that becomes your underwriting profit. So just for some round numbers, if you put $100,000 away from your customers paying in premiums, and they are premiums, and they're put into the reinsurance company to pay claims, and when those contracts expire, if you've spent $40,000 in claims, then you're going to have $60,000 of underwriting profit, which belongs to you, the stockholder.
Okay. So just to rewind a little bit, I think what I heard you say previously is that right now, most buy here, pay here dealers, and tell me if I'm hearing this correctly, most buy here, pay here dealers that you have talked to, if their customer is in a total loss and the customer still owes the dealership a balance, most of the dealers are forgiving that balance.
Well, they have to, and let me tell you why. Because, it's the nature of the customer that we have in the buy here, pay here business that we want to keep the customer, okay? If they've been a good customer, but they're in the buy here, pay here segment of the car business for a reason, okay? They don't have a lot of extra income. And when they're in a total loss situation and the insurance company didn't pay, if the dealer doesn't forgive their debt and get them in another car and get them back to producing payments, then they're just going to let the dealer chase them. Because they're going to go down the street and find another buy here, pay here dealer who's going to put them in a car, and that whatever that money might have been would probably go, if they had any, would go towards the down payment on their new car from another dealer.
Right. Okay. So currently, if I'm a dealer and I'm currently forgiving balances on total loss on customers' loans who have total losses, and I'm collecting, basically I'm giving free gap away. If I'm hearing you correctly, I'm giving free gap away.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
If I collected, so I have that risk already.
That's right.
The risk of having to forgive balances over top of after basically receiving insurance payoff. So if I collected $10 extra from every customer, I would be further ahead than I am right now for
absolutely. It's like, if you buy a third party gap policy or a third party service contract, if you have 100% loss ratio if you're getting it from a third party. And when we say loss ratio, if I put $100 in and I spend $80, I have an 80% loss ratio. Okay, so if you put in this, whether it's a warranty or gap or whatever that happens to be, if you're buying it from a third party, you have spent 100% of that reserve, 100%. So what we're saying is that anything that you keep, if you kept $1 out of every gap that you collected, you're still better off. And what you're saying is that any premium received, you still have the risk. So any premium you receive, you're better off than you would have been. And it is perfectly in your right to cover this loss. Why are you taking on this risk yourself when you have an opportunity to pass it on to who that risk rightly belongs to, the customer? It's their responsibility, right?
Exactly. And not only that, Mr. Bird, but I think what you were going to point out as well, and was that this benefits not only the reinsurance company in the fact that you can collect premium, pass it over to the reinsurance company and pay your claims out, but also the dealership. So example, correct me if I'm wrong, you could take that gap policy and sell it to your customer for an example of $399 or something of that nature, and tack that on to the retail installment contract and charge that customer interest for that policy. And so basically, if you collected $1 of that, you would be further ahead than you are right now with the same risk that you
Absolutely. You still
so
have the risk. So why in the world wouldn't you mitigate that risk by collecting premium when you can do so? And why in the world would you pay a third-party company? So let me point something out to you. If you're buying a gap policy from a third-party company, they're going to expect to have the full premium up front, right?
right.
So you're out all of that money up front if you went in that direction. And if you have claims, then hey, you did good. But what I'm saying is that we're in the buy here, pay here business. It's not like if you're a retail dealer and you buy a gap policy and you resell it, well, you really you're not out any money. Okay. But because we're in the buy here, pay here business and we are funding it through our RFC or however you're funding it, you're putting out the money for those. So even if it was $100, and it's probably more than that, but if it was $100 and you're funding $1,000 of a year, you've put out $100,000. That's pretty simple math, right? So why not put that $100,000 in your own reinsurance company so that whatever is not used to pay claims becomes underwriting profit? And I want to point out something too. Uncle Sam says you can put $2.3 million a year of net written premium into your reinsurance company and elect to be taxed only on any investment income that might occur on that. Okay, so there is lots of benefits to having a reinsurance company, and this is a no-brainer, dealers. This is a real no-brainer, and there are lots of other things that you can do by owning a reinsurance company. But you are in the payment producing business, and if you don't, I mean, my goodness, you do have garage liability, right? I mean, don't you buy insurance to cover your building and cover the cars on the lot and all of that, and in case there's a catastrophe? Well, why in the world wouldn't you allow your customers to purchase insurance to cover their part of this collateral instead of you giving it to them? It just makes sense, don't you think?
Absolutely, I think it does make sense. Now, let me ask you a question. So, play, well, maybe devil's advocate. If there is a downside here, what are the downsides of selling gap to your customer as a buy here, pay here dealer? And is there ever a time that you would not offer the customer gap if they had some other type of product or something of that nature?
Well, the only time that, I mean, there is no downside. We have this risk. We have the risk. Okay. Right. Now you can say, oh, well, my customer can't afford it. Well, then you're giving them free gap. Okay. Because there is a risk there. Now, hopefully they won't ever have a problem, but you and I both know that we have a problem just keeping insurance on cars. Okay. We have in the United States, in the buy here, pay here business, 50% of the book of business out there is uninsured. And the reason that is because it is a fight. We have full-time employees calling to make collection calls for insurance. And what happens is, especially in the day of the General and the Elephant and all of these really cheap insurance companies, and they're cheap because anybody can be cheap if they don't pay claims, right? So if we are in that situation and we have 50% of our book of business out there that is uninsured, why in the world wouldn't you have some way to mitigate that? Put a system in place that you are mitigating your risk. And that's what this is all about.
All right, thank you. So quick question. We have some clients who may offer debt cancellation coverage. They may utilize collateral protection insurance. How does GAP work with those two products?
All right, so it's important to point out that, of course, every state has their own rules when it comes to any products, okay? In most states, GAP is a waiver. In some states, it's insurance. But for the most part, GAP is a waiver. Now, in different states, there's different ways that you have to go about it. But in other words, for Texas, for instance, you're only allowed to charge up to 5% of the amount financed for gap. Okay, so but if you have what's called debt cancellation coverage or loss damage waiver, that is an agreement. It is very similar to gap because it is a waiver. It's not insurance, but it is insured. Just like gap, it is a waiver. But it is an agreement where you are actually receiving more premium than you would just for deficiency balance waiver, which gap is. You're collecting more premium, and this premium, you're saying, okay, if you pay me X number of dollars a month and you have a total loss, I'm going to forgive your debt. Okay. Now, if you're forgiving their debt, then they have no need to buy debt cancellation and gap. Now, on the other hand, there's CPI. CPI is collateral protection insurance. Now, insurance is always going to be a little bit more expensive than a waiver. Okay, so that's important to point out. But it is insurance, whereas debt cancellation only covers the total loss. CPI, or collateral protection insurance, will cover some, if they had a fender bender. Okay, now, of course, CPI is not guaranteeing that the entire debt will be paid off.
Right.
So in that particular case, you can sell them gap to go along with that. Now, what CPI is force-placed insurance. So let me make sure that you understand this. Force-placed insurance is not the customer's insurance, although they will be paying for it. Force-placed insurance is the lender's insurance because the customer didn't fulfill their contractual agreement to provide full coverage insurance. So when you sell them a car, that's the time to sell them gap, at that time on the retail installment contract. After they have lapsed their insurance, then you would force place CPI on the car. Okay, so you would be collecting premium for that, but that's to cover you, and that is not to cover the customer. It is to cover the debt on the car. Okay, and so that was done after the fact, not at time of sale. So you can see that if they did maintain insurance coverage, that gap would come into play. If they did not maintain insurance coverage, but they continued to pay you like as agreed, then but they didn't keep their insurance, then you can force place CPI on that customer, and then you would collect that premium as well. And again, folks, that's a no-brainer. Why have people running around out there without insurance? And I want to ask you a question. Even if, let's say that CPI was $130 a month, well, most customers out there are paying that or more for their insurance. Number one. Number two, even if it's $130 a month, if you multiply that times, say, 100, that's a lot of money out there. And my point is this: if you have one total loss that is not covered at all, whatever your ACV is, and you can say in your head right now, why must ACV $7,000? How many payments of $130 could you pay to cover that one claim? Okay, even if you were struggling trying to get the customer to pay that, and now most of them's going to pay it, and you have the option, if they don't pay it, to go out there and hook them up on that tow truck and take the car home with you. Okay, because they did not fulfill their obligation. But my point is that just like your own car insurance or your homeowner's insurance or your garage liability insurance, okay, this is your insurance. You're buying it. You just have the option, because of state law, because they did not fulfill their obligation, to ask them to pay for it.
Thank you for that explanation of the difference really between debt cancellation and CPI, which will lead into next week's webinar episode, where we will go more into depth about debt cancellation and CPI and the opportunities there for buy here, pay here dealers. We'll also talk about loss damage waiver, which will be good for lease here, pay here dealers as well. So just to summarize, I think kind of what I've heard you say is gap can be sold to your customers as long as they're not carrying debt cancellation or loss damage waiver. Gap, so gap does not go with debt cancellation, loss damage waiver, but gap can be sold to customers, and then CPI could be placed after that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Because you are selling them gap at time of sale. CPI generally is not done at time of sale.
Okay. All right, awesome. So ultimately, what we're talking about here is really found money, because most of the dealers that we talk to, as we found, are giving away free gap. So if they're able to take and say charge, for example, $399, and of course some states are different, but $399 to all their customers for the same exact risk that they have currently, and they collected 100 of it per customer, then they would be a lot further ahead financially than they are right now. Is that right?
It's a no-brainer.
No-brainer. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Berg, for your time today. I trust that this has been informative and helpful for you dealers. If you have any further questions or would like more information on what we've talked about today, simply click on the secure link below and we will contact you. Again, I'm Taylor Berg, President of DealerRE, and we would love to help you if you think that that we can. We'd like to, again, invite you to join us next week, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, to discuss CPI and debt cancellation. Until then, stay healthy, and we will see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, and God bless.